When it comes to character animation, walk cycles are one of the first things people want to make, which is kind of funny because I think they're pretty hard to do well. So in this one, that's what we'll be working on. If you want to follow along, you can go to my Gumroad and download a free character rig that I made. Also, check out my Patreon for all the project files for my videos, coupon codes for free Gumroad products, and a bunch of other files that I don't share anywhere else. I also donate some of the profits to environmental causes each month. Link is in the description. Here's a summary of what we'll cover. First, I'll talk about some resources that will help you learn about walk cycles, then we'll start setting up our key poses and talk about common weight distribution. We'll go over how to make this loop seamlessly with some graph editor tricks, and then we'll make our character move forward without the feet slipping around. Alright, let's get started. When I was making my first walk cycles, I was learning through trial and error, but walk cycles are really common, and as a result, there's a lot of resources out there. If you're looking for a book, the one people always go to is called The Animator's Survival Kit by Richard Williams. It has a ton of tips on walk cycles and animation in general. One thing this book helped me learn about is the 4 key poses in most walk cycles. If you don't have this book, just do a quick search for walk cycle key poses, and you'll see what I mean. We're going to talk about these poses a little more, but I also want to mention that you can use reference videos too. You can make them yourself, or just go to YouTube and search for walk cycle references. It can even be from another piece of animation you like. I think it's a great way to learn. And if you're on the desktop version of YouTube, you can go frame by frame by using the comma and period keys, which will help a lot if you're trying to analyze a video. Let's quickly go over these key poses, and don't worry too much about memorizing them right now, because we'll keep talking about them and you can always check some references if you need them. We're going to start with the contact pose, which is the point where the front foot touches the ground. Notice how the character's torso is between the legs. The weight should be pretty close to the center. Next is the down position, where the hips are at their lowest point. This is also where the weight is mostly in the front leg. Next is the middle of our walk cycle. People usually call this the passing pose because the legs start passing each other here. The arms should also be pretty close to passing each other right here too, and this is where the arms will be a little more straightened. Then we have the up position, where the hips are at their highest point. The front leg is ready to fall back down into the contact pose. The only difference is that the contact pose is mirrored right here. But you can basically repeat these steps, and that would be a common walk cycle. Keep in mind that this isn't the only way to do a walk cycle. These aren't rules, they're just guidelines to help people get started. Some of the most interesting walk cycles are the ones that stray away from this system. Okay, let's start posing our character. Alright, here we are in Blender. I'm using version 2.93 for this one. So first thing I'm going to do is bring my character in. So I'm going to link it, so I'll just go to File, Link, and then find the file over here, Test Rig. And I'm going to link the collection, and I have material turned on, so I'm going to change this from texture to material rather. I'll just change the matte cap too, because I like the way this looks. So when you link it, it's not going to work if you try to go into pose mode in here. First, what you have to do is either make a proxy or a library override. So I just hit F3 to search. I'm just searching for make library override like that. And once you do that, it'll allow you to go into pose mode now. So a lot of the animation basics, like using the dope sheet and inserting keyframes and like a lot of the beginner stuff, I'm not going to cover in this one. I do have some other tutorials you can watch if you're struggling to keep up with this one. So let's briefly go over some of the rig controls just as like a recap. You can see on layer 2 right here, this is where most of our controllers are going to be, most of the bones we want to use. On layer 1, this is where we have all of the deforming bones and ones that you would use if you're using forward kinematics or FK. So back on the second layer, this is the IK control for the hands, for the arms, like that. And if you rotate that, it'll make the hands rotate too. You can turn off the hand rotation using this bone with this controller right here. And when you click on it, you can see that it's a switch. It says switch ROT for rotation. When you move that down, it'll naturally follow the arm, and then you can use this little bone as rotation instead. And this will turn the IK off, so when you move this one down, you can see it snaps back to like its normal position. And at that point, that's when you would use these bones to control the arm. We also have IK set up for our head, so when you move this down, you can see that's how you get some slouching movements like that. And when you rotate it, that's how you get the head to rotate. You can turn this off with this switch right here, and it will use all of the deforming forward kinematic bones. When you move the feet, you want to use the heel bone right here. If you try to use this one, it won't let you because the location is locked. This is just meant for rotating on the toe like that. You can see when we rotate the heel on the x-axis, we get a heel pivot and one in the center of the foot like that. You can pivot this on the local Y for foot rolling, but we're not really going to be using this in this video, but that is an option for the rig. All right, now that we have all of this covered, I'm going to switch off the IK and the copy rotation right here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to use forward kinematics for our arms. FK gives you very smooth arcs like that. That's not something that's as easy to get with inverse kinematics. With inverse kinematics, if you set it up, you just set like a pose right here, a pose right here, and a pose right here. Instead of being a smooth shape like that, it will just go in a straight line. You can still make a good walk cycle with inverse kinematics for your arms, but I just like the way it looks more when you're using FK. Once again, resetting your pose, you can do really easily by just selecting the bones that you want to reset. You can reset the location with Alt-G, rotation with Alt-R, and the scale with Alt-S. And now we're going to get started with our first pose, which is the contact pose. Before I do that, I'm just going to select this bone right here, the root bone, and just hit H to hide it. Just because we're not going to be using it, and when we're looking from the side like this, when you hit 3, it just kind of gets in the way. So I like to clean it up a little by just hiding it. And I'll bring up my dope sheet. What I'm going to do is just bring our body down a little more. We can do that with the control torso bone. So I'll just hit G and Z to move it down on the Z axis like that. And we'll move one of the feet forward. This is going to be our front leg right here. So normally with the contact pose, this is where the heel would first contact the ground. I'll rotate that heel bone on the local x-axis like that and move it forward until it's like not completely straight, but like almost straight like that. And we can move this back too. I usually like it to be bending in the center of the foot like that. You can do that with the heel bone also, just by rotating it in the other direction on the local x-axis. And now I want the body to visually be between the 2 feet, like in the center. The weight of the body right now is closer to being on top of the back foot right here. So I just want to move that out a little like that. And now we'll insert the first keyframe. So I just want to select all of the feet bones right here like that. And I'll select the control torso and hit I, location, rotation like that. So when we go to our dope sheet and with those selected, you can see we have all of our bones right here, and it's only the location and rotation of all of them. And you can see I have my timeline set to be 20 frames right now. And that's because one of our steps, not the entire cycle, but just the first step, is going to be 20 frames long. I guess it's also a good thing to note that if you come up to here, you can change the frame rate. I'm going to change the frame rate to 30, just because this is what I commonly use. If you're learning about animation in a more like traditional way, frame rate is usually 24 frames per second, because that's what was common when people were using film. So now that we have our feet ready, I can just copy those to the other side. If you just click the top one right here, that's the summary. It should just select all of them in that frame. So you can select that and hit Control C to copy. Go over to 20 and hit Control Shift V, and that will paste it, but flipped. So you can see now when we scrub through, it's going to the same pose, but it's flipped to the other side. And we have this interpolation being set for us by Blender. One thing I don't like is that our first key is on frame 1, because that means that 10 isn't in the very center. So usually I like to start on 0 like that. And you can see it looks like it's looping pretty well when we just hit play. The only thing is that this is one step, so you can see it flickers right here. And it looks pretty good from the side, but when you look at it like this, it flickers at the end of every one. So I'm just going to set everything up for one step first. And then once we're done with that, we'll just flip everything to the other side. So our full walk cycle will be 40 frames. An example of that, I guess, would be taking these first keys and copying them with Control C and pasting them on frame 40 with Control V. So now 0 and 40 are the exact same pose, and 20 is the same pose but flipped. And now when we hit play, it should loop normally. But before we do that, I'll just delete this and we'll just fill in 0 to 20. So halfway between the two contact poses would be the passing pose. Select all of these and hit Control R to reset the location. Like that. And I don't want to affect the location of these, so when I hit I to insert a keyframe, I'm only going to put one in for the rotation. It's okay if you insert them for the location also, but it might make a little more mess in the graph editor that we would just have to clean up later. So I like to only insert on the channels that I need. So now it's coming to the center like that. And this foot should be off the ground. So I can just come up here and raise it very slightly like that. And if you hit N over here and go to item, you can see all of the transform channels. So when I move this up, I'm moving it on the Z, the local Z, like that. And that's where I want to insert the key. So you can just right click on the Z location and insert single keyframe like that. And now when you drop this down, you can see in the center, it only inserted for the Z. And once again, this is just making it so I don't have to delete some frames or clean them up later. You can see it's coming up and then going back down like that. But I also want this foot to be more at an angle. So I'll pivot from the toe right here and insert a key for rotation right there. It's starting to look a little better, but I want to work on the down position now, which is right after the contact right here. And it's called the down position because this is when our center of weight, like our hips, would be at the lowest. So on frame 5, I just want to make the hips right here, the control torso, a little lower. So I'll just bring that down slightly. And we can always change this later in the graph editor if you don't bring it down far enough or bring it down too far. So I just brought it down a little and I'll insert a location keyframe right there. So it's coming down a little like that. And I also want to remove the rotation right here. So I'll just hit Alt R for the heel, for the front foot, and I'll insert a rotation keyframe. So we have our contact with our foot up right here, the heel is just touching, and then it falls flat like that. The most of our weight is on our front foot right here, which would allow us to pick up our back foot without falling. I don't like how the foot is bent, so what I'll do is reset the rotation for the back heel, and I can insert a rotation keyframe right there. I'm still trying to keep the weight in the center, so what I like to do is bring this back a little, and I also want to rotate from the toe a little more. And you can bring this up pretty high too, so I'll bring this up even past 45 degrees and just move that until it looks like the weight is centered. I just want to insert a location keyframe for that, so I'll hit I and location right there. You can see when we scrub through, it looks a little broken, and that's because I must not have inserted one of the keyframes after moving it, and it snapped back to the position before. So I'll just hit Control Z. Yeah, it seems like I didn't insert the rotation. So I'll hit I and insert for the rotation, and for the rotation for our toe right here. Okay, now that looks a little better. The down position, our hips are at our lowest. Most of our weight is in the front, which allows our character to lift up their back foot like that. Then we have the passing, where our legs are crossing each other. And then we have our up, where most of the weight is in the back leg. And it's called the up because this is where our hips are at their highest. So we can just bring this up quite a bit. So I'll just hit G and Z until our back leg is almost straight. There's a slight bend in it, and I'll just hit I and insert for the location. So now we have a nice little bob right there. We're not quite done with the legs, but when you hit play, it's starting to look pretty good now, and it's a recognizable walk. You got a little bob in the motion right there, and the feet look pretty natural for the most part. I want the weight to be pretty centered, so I think we need to move this a little further forward, like that. I also want to remove the rotation on our toe right here. So I'll hit Alt R for our toe and insert a rotation keyframe. Bring this up and out and maybe rotate this a little more dramatically like that. And I want our leg to be almost straight. So if you hit G and then hold Shift, it'll move in smaller increments like that so you can get more fine-tuned detail. I think that looks pretty good. So I'll insert a location and a rotation keyframe right there. That looks okay. We can always tidy this up a little more later, and we should start working on our hips now. So it's normal for our hips to rotate in the direction of whichever foot is furthest down. So on the down position right here, this is the foot that is furthest down. This one is currently being lifted up, so that means our weight should be shifted to this side. So for our contact pose, our first contact pose, I'm just going to rotate that, and that would be the local Z axis like that. But if you just go from the front and rotate in this direction, that should be fine too. I just want to rotate it very slightly and hit I and insert for the rotation. And you can see we only have this inserted on frame 0. So when we're done posing our hip, we have to remember to copy it and paste it flipped on frame 20. It's also pretty normal for hips to rotate in the direction of whichever leg is forward. So you can hit R and Y twice to rotate on the local Y, or you can just hit R and Z to rotate on the Z axis like that. Maybe like that. It's pretty exaggerated, but I think it's fine. Hit I, insert for the rotation, And now let's copy this with Control C and paste it on frame 20 with Control Shift V, like that. So you can see the arms are actually moving a little, and that's because when we go to our first layer, when you move any of these bones, the arms should follow because they're using FK now. If you have this switched back on like that, the hands will stay level because they're snapping to the IK controllers, but without that, they will wobble a little. So I like to do them last, just so that I have everything set up the way I want, and then I can change the arms. Otherwise, if you do the arms first and then you move the hips and the head and all that, and the shoulders, then you might have to fix the arms again later. So I'll save that for the end. So next, I'll move our head down very slightly. So for the contact, I'll just bring this down very slightly to get a little curve like that. Insert for the location, copy that, and paste it on frame 20 right there. And I want to have more of a slouch on our down position right here, like that. I'll bring it forward slightly, and maybe I can tilt our head a little. And I'll insert for the location and rotation. And I didn't insert a key for the rotation for frame 0. As you can see, I want the head to be straight up and down right here. So I'm just going to reset the rotation like that. And what I should have done was inserted for location and rotation for frame 0 also, but I didn't. Because we edited this, we have to once again copy it and paste it flipped at the end. So we have a little slouch like that. And I think the slouch and the little head bob adds a little more weight to the walk. It makes the character look a little heavier. And for our up position, bring this back slightly and rotate the head up a little like that. And that will add even a little more weight. I think it's creating a weird kink in the body. So I think what we should do is select the hips and rotate those on the x-axis. So R, X, X. And you can see when I tilt that back, our body gets a little smoother. And I'll insert a keyframe for the rotation right there and copy what's on frame 0 and bring that to frame 20, but flipped. And now that we have this, I think we should work on the hands. What I'll do first is move the shoulders. This leg is forward, so we look for the opposite arm and move that one forward, if that makes any sense. So first what I'll do is just select these shoulders and rotate them on the Z-axis like that. And I'll insert a rotation keyframe for those. I put that on the wrong frame, so I'll actually just select the top one and drag it to 0 like that. It's also normal for your shoulders to rotate opposite your hips. If our hips are rotating this way, I want our shoulders to rotate the opposite way like that. Insert another rotation keyframe again. And then we can copy this, Control C, bring it to frame 20, Control Shift V. We didn't even touch the arms and we already have a little motion, but I want to go to layer 1 so we can actually change the arms right here. So I'll just bring them down a little first with R and then X twice. So you can rotate these on the local X, and I'll just copy that to the other side with Control C, Control Shift V. And I'll bring this to frame 0. And I can also rotate this on the X. So most people will tell you that your elbow only like rotates in one direction. And on this rig, that would be the local X. If you move it on the Z, that'll look kind of broken, or the Y will like twist in an unnatural way. You want to be doing all of that rotation from your shoulder. And if we think that it should be more forward, we would select our arm and hit R and then Z twice. That's the local Z axis like that. And we can rotate this on the local Z back a little and then give this a slight bend. It looks like our arm is crossing to the other side, maybe a little too much. So I'll move that on the X, bring that back a little. All right. I'll rotate this on the Y to bring it in a little. I think that looks pretty good. So I'll just select all of these arm bones, just the bicep and the forearm right there, and insert for the location and rotation. And we can copy the first frame, Control Shift V on 20. Looking a little better. So I think what's normal is right in the center at our passing pose. This is where the hands would be like the lowest point in their arc, and they're also like closest to the center. First of all, I'm gonna move these in a little like that. We'll just copy this. And we can straighten our arms out a little too, like that. And I think I'll move that a little on the Z to be a little closer to the center. I'll just copy that to the other side. Make sure you select all of those bones. And I, location, rotation. So now we have a pretty bouncy walk right here. One thing you can do is add a little secondary motion with our hands. Just select them right here and insert a key for the rotation on frame 0. I can just copy that to frame 20. Go to the passing pose right here, and I want the hands to be rotated in the direction that they just left. This hand on the opposite side is coming from the front, so I want it to be pointing towards the front. So I'll just select the hand bone, R, Z twice for the local Z rotation, and just point it in that direction like that. Insert a rotation keyframe, and I'll just do the opposite for the other hand. So R, Z twice like that, because it's coming from the back, and insert a rotation keyframe. So now we'll get like a little swing with our hands. And if you think that the hips are swinging too much on the Z axis, you can just come in and change it. One way you can do that is, the way we've been doing it in the dope sheet, or you can come to the graph editor with Control Tab by hovering over the dope sheet, or you can just switch it from up here, but I usually do Control Tab. So you want to select your hips, and the motion we're targeting is the local Z rotation, like that. Select everything over here and hit period on your numpad to zoom in, and this will make everything visible. You can just find your Z rotation, which is right here, and when you have it selected, you can hit Shift H, and that will isolate it. When you want to bring everything back, you can just hit Alt H, like that. So now we can see it a little more clearly. Basically, with both of these selected, because they're opposite each other, that means 0 should be in the middle. And all we have to do is scale this on the y-axis. But you want to make sure that when you scale it, you're using the right pivot point. So you can just hit period, make sure that this is using bounding box center. So now when you scale this on the y-axis, you're just changing how far it's swinging like that. You can even go into the negative, so it's like swinging on the opposite side. And what I like to do is adjust this while it's playing. Both of these selected, just start scaling on the y-axis like that. So we can bring it down to make it a little more subtle, or bring it up to make it completely ridiculous and broken. So now I want to see what this actually looks like when it's looping. I want to select 2 layers. So over here, I'll just click the second one and shift click the first one. So now we have 2 layers visible. So now we can select all of our bones with A, and you want to select all of them over here too. Make sure that nothing is hidden over here. If you do have anything hidden, you can just hit Alt H to unhide it, and then just hit A to make sure everything's selected. So I'm going to make our timeline a little longer. I'll just put this back up to 250. So now we can copy everything with Control C, come over to 20 right here, and hit Control Shift V, and now it should loop properly. So if we change this to 40, it's actually looping now. With our timeline longer, it just stops at some point. So we can actually make this loop pretty easily, and we don't have to just duplicate a bunch of keyframes. So what you want to do is come into the graph editor over here, make sure everything is selected. And once again, if you have anything hidden, you want to unhide it with Alt H, and then select everything again. And now we can add a cycle modifier. The way you can do that is by hovering over here and hitting N to open up the side panel, and we have modifiers over here. You'll only see this if you have something actively selected. So if you have nothing actively selected and you hit A, we still don't have an active selection. What you have to do is select something first and then hit A. And then you can add a cycles modifier like that. That'll only make the channel that you selected have the modifier. What you can do is, with everything still selected, just copy the modifier right here and paste it. And there's this little option down here. You can just open up that box and choose replace existing. Otherwise, every time you paste it, you'll end up with multiple cycles modifiers like this. So make sure you choose replace existing. So now when we play it, we have this nice looping motion, but we only have this amount of keyframes, which is pretty nice. Another easy way of doing this without going through all those steps is just selecting everything, hitting Shift E, and choose Make Cyclic like that, and it will do the same thing, basically, but in fewer steps. If you can't remember that shortcut, you can also come to Channel, Extrapolation Mode, and Make Cyclic. One thing that this looping allows us to do pretty easily is offset some of our keyframes. So usually what I like to do is offset our head a little. So you can see it's bobbing like this. We can make it look like it has even more weight by offsetting the rotation. So I'll just scroll down and try to find the X rotation, because I'm looking for this rotation, and that's the local X, as you can see. So I can just select one and then hit L like that, and it'll select everything on that channel. And while it's playing, we can just move it a little, and you can see if you move it too far, it starts to act a little weird. But I like to just offset it by like 2 or 3 frames like that. And you can see now it's lagging behind a little and creating just a little more like of a natural movement. And this works with the way we set up the loop because it's also looping backwards as well as forwards. If we were duplicating keyframes, we'd have to make sure that we were duplicating them in the negative direction also over here. So you don't have to worry about that when you're using the curve modifiers. If we wanted, we could do the same thing with our hands. I think it's subtle enough that you might not really notice the difference, but you know, it is an option. So I want to be able to move our character forward so they're not just walking in place. But before we do that, I have to take a look at the feet motion. We're going to make our character move forward at like a constant speed. So if we were to look at a curve that's moving at constant speed, it should look completely flat. We'll select this heel, and when it's touching the ground, we want it to be moving the same speed as our ground, but in the opposite direction. So we'll look at this one right here because that's just first. And we're looking at the Y direction right here. You can see that up here. This is the forward and back. So I'll drop this down so we can see the Y right here. And with that selected, just hit Shift H. And this is the curve that we're looking at. So this is where it first contacts the ground, our contact pose. Where it starts to leave the ground is at frame 20 right here. After that, it starts to be lifted up slightly. Okay, what we need is for 0 to 20 to be completely flat. So there are a few ways of doing this, and all of those options can be found over here under key. So we have handle types and interpolation mode right here. The first one is by hitting V, which is handle types. You can set these to vector, and you can see when you do that, it makes this completely straight and flat like that, which is good. So another thing you can do is by selecting both of these and hitting T to change the interpolation to linear like that. It'll flatten the opposite side of that keyframe also of the point, and I don't like that. So the way that I usually do it, and it's like a little more work, but I like it more, is you select both of these and hit V to change the handle type to free like that. And this will allow you to change just one side independently like that. So one thing that you can do is just select the handle that you want to flatten, and you can scale it down to 0. So instead of dragging it down like that, you can just hit S to scale and 0. You want to do that for this side also. Select that side, S and 0. And now this is completely flat, okay? And this side, we can, you know, scale it out, rotate it, do whatever we want, and it shouldn't alter the other side. That's one thing that's nice about using free, is you can move both of the handles independently. And now we can set our character to move forward, and we'll go back and forth a little bit until it looks good. So what I want to do is move our root bone, but it's hidden, so we can hover over here and hit Alt-H to bring it back like that. And this is the one we're going to be moving on the Y-axis. What you can also do is tab out of pose mode and actually just move your armature object too. The benefit of that is that your character rotates around the origin point, which is this little dot right here. And if you move in pose mode, if you move your root, your origin point will stay over here. It'll just like walk away from its origin point. And that's where it rotates around too. So if you wanted to make your character like walk along a curve or something like that, it might make more sense to move the like armature object instead. And if you don't know what I mean when I say armature object, if you come over here to your outliner, you can see we have bones that we can select down here. So you can either animate your root bone right here, or even higher up, you can animate this directly. So this is a bone, this is an object. The object contains all of the bones, and the bones are just little pieces of the object. Back in pose mode, what I'm going to do is just control everything with our root. How do we know how far to move it forward? Well, basically what I want is when our heel touches the ground, I want it to look visually like it's staying in the right spot. So I've seen people like put little pieces of tape on their monitor, which I don't really want to do that. Some people will bring in like an empty object to use as a reference, but I think this is a perfect job for our 3D cursor. And I'll show you why, because we can select this and just hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and there's our reference right there. We can move this forward now, and our reference will just stay there. And it's exactly where we want it, completely precise. So the first way is just kind of eyeballing it. Remember, when we have this selected, what we're doing is making sure that it stays in the same spot from 0 to 20 right here. So you can select your root bone and right click the Y location, insert single keyframe, and then go to 20 and move this until that heel bone is in the same spot roughly, and then insert single keyframe again. It looks like it's still sliding quite a bit, and that is because our bone isn't moving at a constant speed. It's not moving in a linear fashion. So we can fix this pretty easily by just selecting these points down here and hitting T and changing this to linear. Now it'll be moving at like a linear speed at a constant rate. Like I just eyeballed it. I didn't try to get it completely precise, but I think it still looks pretty good. You can't really notice the foot slipping. If you want to be completely precise, what you want to do is find out how far your feet are actually traveling. So this is actually pretty easy to do, and I'll show you how. I'll just reset the cursor to the world origin with Shift S, so it's back in the center. So I'll just delete the keys for our root bone for now. So this is pretty easy to do, but it requires a little math. Luckily, we can just do the math directly in Blender pretty easily. So we can select this location right here by just hovering over and hitting Control C like that. So we can move to frame 20 now. What we want to do is find the distance that our foot is actually traveling when it goes from here to here. So the easiest way that I found to do this is you just want to make this not negative anymore. So you can just delete the negative. You want to delete the M2 and you just want to add it to the other value. So I'm just going to do it in here by adding a plus sign and then hitting paste. And once again, you want to make sure you delete that M at the end right there, and you can just hit enter. This is the value right here that our feet are actually traveling. So you can just hover over and hit Control C to copy it. And if we scrub around from frame to frame, our feet will snap back in the right position. We changed the value, but we didn't actually insert a keyframe, so it'll just snap back to the value that it's supposed to be. Insert a location keyframe for your root on frame 0, and then on frame 20 right here, you just want to insert that value for the Y location like that. Insert a location keyframe again. And once again, you want to make sure that these are set to linear, so T and linear. And this will ensure that your feet don't slip at all because the distance that they're covering is being matched exactly by the root bone. The next problem we run into is we want this to loop, but we don't want it to loop in the same way. So if I have this selected, I'm going to delete the Z location by selecting it over here and hit X, the X location too, because we only need the Y location for this. So if I do it the same way we did with our other bones with Shift E and make cyclic, you can see it's not continuing to go up. It'll come to 20 and then snap back like that, which is not what we want. We want it to just keep going. So there are two ways to do this. Once again, you can just select this, hit N, come over to your modifiers, and where it says repeat motion, instead of repeat motion, you can do repeat with offset. And that will make it so that it's doing the same thing, except its starting value is like added on top of its ending value like that. And now when we press play, it'll just, your character just keeps walking. You can also do that for before also, because it's looping incorrectly when you go before. So you can set that to repeat with offset like that. And what's cool about this is it doesn't have to be completely straight. If we change this back to Bezier right here, Shift S, flatten handles, you can see it's still going to work properly in the graph editor anyway. I mean, our feet will be slipping, but say if you wanted your character to have a weird little lag in their step, it'll continue to move. Your character will continue to move forward still, which is pretty cool. So I just deleted the modifier, and the other way to do it is also with Shift E, and you can choose linear extrapolation. But one problem with this is that it only works when it's flat. So I'll change this to linear, and now you can see it's like working properly. I think it's based on the angle of the handles. So you can see if I rotate this, it'll just continue going in the same direction. But because these handles are flat, it's just going to be pointing straight forward. So if you're using linear extrapolation right here with Shift E, you have to make sure that these are set to linear or else it won't work correctly. You can see from 0 to 20, it looks really good. But the second half, your foot will slide because we didn't actually fix our curve for that side. So if you want to copy all of the movements from this foot to this foot, so I'm going to select everything over here and select everything except for this first frame right here. So you can just Shift select that to get rid of it. And I'm going to delete everything. So we only have this first one right here. These, it looks like they're in there, but it's just kind of showing it as a summary. So with those deleted, come over here. You can select everything and copy it with Control C, come over here and hit Control Shift V. And now when we look at it, it'll look completely broken. All we need to do is offset these. So we can do that in the graph editor. We're basically just going to move it forward. We can select everything and move it forward 20 frames. So G and then X. And you just want to put that last frame on 20. And when we do that, it should look fine. If you want this to look neater so that it's not actually pushed like that, what you want to do is select all of the keys on frame 0 right here and hit V, change them to free. Do the same thing for 20 and 40. Move everything by 20 frames. Select all of these frames, including 40, and I'll just Shift D to duplicate them. And before pressing anything, hit X, drag them back to the beginning. And now we just need to delete these ones after 40, and it should work properly now. So that's quite a few steps, so I like to try to save that for the very end until we're like, you know, actually done editing things. If you're annoyed that your character keeps walking away and you have to like follow them with your camera, what you can do is just select your root bone right here. You can hit this little disable button, and that will make it so that your keyframes are still there, they're just not working. You also have to make sure that you shut this off where you actually want your character to be, because I can shut it off when they're like a little further away and that's where they stay. So I usually like to do this on frame 0. A quick tip for like a smooth and natural looking walk cycle is paying attention to the position of the heels. So one thing that I learned pretty recently actually, if we look at the Y location right here, I'll just isolate that with Shift H. You can see when the foot is leaving the ground right here, the heel is still moving back a little, like that. If we don't have it working that way, it'll look a little unnatural when you actually have your character moving forward. It doesn't look bad, but when it comes off like at an angle like that, it just looks very like robotic. So I like to make sure that the curve in our graph editor is kind of like a smooth transition when it comes to the bottom. And it works well when the top is like that also. It's almost like our foot can kind of overshoot the mark a little and then come back down, because right here it's just kind of sliding into place. So if we want this to look a little better, what we can do is right here we can raise the spot a little like that, just slightly. And if we want this to look more natural, we want to smooth this bump out. And because these are using free, we can rotate each side independently. So what I'll do is usually just like scale this out way too far so that when I rotate it, I can kind of like lay it on top of the other point like that, and then I'll scale it back down. And I feel like that's like a quick way to get like a more smooth motion, but you can also just eyeball it. So I'll just like rotate that up until it looks a little smoother. So you can see the bone is kind of like detaching from the foot a little, and it's like bending the toe. So to fix this, we would have to go over to the Z location right here, and we'd have to change this value. So we can just select that, hit G, Y, and I'll hold Shift to move it up slowly until the leg is bending slightly. And now it should look a little more natural. And when you're done messing with this, you just want to copy everything to the other side the way I showed before, which is quite a process, but it's okay. And I think having the feet fall like this makes it look a little more natural. Finding little tricks like this is something that watching reference videos helps a lot with. And once again, the shape that we're looking for in here is completely straight right here, and then it smooths off in a gradual, nice smooth way right here. And it does the same thing at the top also. If you want to experiment with different types of walks, that's something that I think reference is really great for also. Some things that are really fun to do is just like changing the angle of your feet, things like that. So we can come in here, and we're not actually using the local Z rotation in here at all. So if we come in to our heels, we can actually just delete that, Alt H, so we can see everything. If we want to get rid of our Z rotation, we can actually search for it up here. So I'll just do Z quaternion like that. So is this ZQ. It'll only show those channels, so we know that we can just delete all of these and it'll be fine. Now I can rotate these out like that, and I'll just copy that to the other side. And now we have like a much sillier walk. That's something that's like really easy to just mess around with, is changing little things like that. Another thing we can do is select our control torso right here. I'm gonna clear that, and we can find the Z location where it goes up and down, and we can mess with these curves a little too. So if we wanted to, we could make the lowest points go down a lot lower, like that, for some pretty weird looking walk cycles. We could move everything down if we wanted to. You can even mess around with like inverting it. You know, once again, like what I showed you, like these aren't rules, they're just guidelines. So if you mess with them, you can get some pretty interesting results. This looks almost more like the character is trying to be sneaky, like they're trying to take really soft steps. You can just exaggerate it by scaling it on the Y like that, but you might have to bring it down a little more too, so that the feet don't stretch away from the body like that. A lot of people say that when you make your character go down a little faster, then when they go up, it looks a little more natural. So it would be pretty easy to do that. All you have to do is just move your contact positions down a little so that these look more like shark fins or like waves or something like that instead. Apparently this is more of a natural movement because it takes a lot less effort to fall down than it does to, like, you know, push yourself up. Another thing I like to do is just make the hands look a little more casual. So you can just select all of the fingers. That's on the first pose layer right here. And I'll just select everything and hit R, X twice. Ooh, that's not working right. I have to hit period first and switch the pivot point to individual origins. R, X twice, so that's the local Y axis. And we can just move that slightly like that and copy that to the other side. And we don't really have to insert any keys for these to stay in place. Just remember that if you like move these at any point, like if you reset the location and rotation of everything, these will snap back to normal. So if you do want these to stay in place permanently, then you can just insert a keyframe. All right, that's it for this one. I hope you all found this helpful. If you have any requests for future videos, leave a comment. And once again, the project file for this video will be available on Patreon. I'd like to thank my patrons for their support, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a good one.